Hi, my name is Calvin Davis, and I am a current freshman at the University of Maryland, College Park, majoring in computer science. I'm taking a course in the University Honors Program here at UMD, where we've been learning about the way that information and power are derived from the human body. That is to say, we've been exploring topics such as dissection and historical examples of doctors treating human bodies, and the ethics of human tissue sampling, and things like that. We've looked at how labor and science exerts itself in the form of racism, both today and in history. And we've also looked at things like how racism has directly or indirectly affected the way the human body is, the way the human body works, and the way the human body has evolved. This is my final project for the class, and what we were tasked with is just exploring a topic that means something to us and tying it back to the things we've learned in class, either indirectly or directly. And that could be anything from exploring deeper into one of the topics we discussed or finding something totally different and relating it back to the class. In my case, I decided to explore how being a musician affects the human body. I'm also exploring how jobs in musicianship tend to change the human body. That is to say, music as a form of income, rather than just playing for fun or recreationally, may change how one views music. I'm exploring exactly what that effect looks like. My motivation for this assignment is because I've been playing the piano since I was 5 years old. I've also played the clarinet in my middle and high school bands, as well as dabbling in guitar, drums, and other instruments. And I've noticed effects on my body, such as calluses from playing the guitar, a callus here from playing the clarinet. My lung capacity is increased because of playing the clarinet, and my fingers stretch more because of the piano. I also have a job in music currently, working at a church in my hometown, where I play with a contemporary worship band every Saturday. So in this video, I will be exploring my own experiences with this topic, historical and modern sources on this topic, and some other personal experiences from people that I know. One of the big things that we've been doing in this class is looking at historical sources about the human body and juxtaposing them with modern ideas and sources from today. And I decided to do the same thing with this assignment. So I browsed medical journals and historical archives, looking for historical explorations of this topic or things related to it. And actually, the things that I found were very interesting. One of the archived sources that I found was written by a man named Richard Brown. Richard Brown was an apothecary in England in the 1700s. He published a work called Medicina Musica in 1729, which essentially means music and medicine in Latin. He looked at how singing, listening to music, and dancing all affect the human body. According to him, especially in singing promotes healthy blood flow because air is pressurized in a singer's lungs, which means that the pressure incites more blood to be flowing through the lung and thus throughout the rest of the body. The blood flow, on top of the fact that the diaphragm, as a result of being pressurized, presses down on the stomach, actually promotes better digestion. Now, obviously today that may not be true, but it is one historical example of the topic that I'm exploring. He also saw that singing would actually help to resolve asthma in singers because the singing and the constant pressure on their airways would help them to open up. He also explores tarantism, which in his time they believed would overcome someone when they heard certain kinds of music. The tarantism would involve involuntary and extreme dancing. His anatomical evidence for this was that the notes vibrating the air in such a way would incite the four humors within the body to trigger the muscles to start dancing without the person being able to control it at all. The concept of the four humors was popular during this time. They believed that the entire body was essentially controlled by the absence or excess of four fluids. They called them humors. These were blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Naturally, with this belief, the vibrations in the air caused by music are understandably believed to vibrate the humors and move them around in certain ways and thus change the human body in a number of ways. It was difficult to find source material on instrumental playing, which honestly was the focus of my study because I am more of an instrumentalist. But I also wanted to explore singing just as much as I explored the other instruments. However, I did find another source on singing specifically called Medical Science in Relation to the Voice as a Musical Instrument by Lennox Brown in 1876. He posited that the greatest singers have an inexhaustible supply of breath. Here's a quote from his publication. While good health is essentially necessary to good voice, it may be said that, as a simple matter of hygiene, Practice of the respiratory muscles on a right method, be it always remembered, such as singing implies, is often the greatest service in improving the health of the lungs. Essentially, this means that because singers have to rehearse and practice and exhaust their lungs often, this strengthens their lung capacity. And that checks out. It sounds right that singing and the pressure on the lungs would help to increase lung capacity. Here's another quote from his publication. "The voice should always be exercised on notes well within the range of the singer. Indeed, it might be said that on all grounds that, except on the rarest occasions, the extreme limit of the voice should never be attempted. For it is certain that, not only is it most injurious medically to sing always at full voice, but that the greatest pleasure is given by those voices which seem to have a reserve of power, or to put it another way, those voices in which the hearer never feels that the mechanism is going to fail." He believed that singers should never push themselves beyond their limits and sing within their range. He also believed that there was a social consequence to denying this and trying to sing in ways that they couldn't confidently do. For those listening to the music, if it sounds like the singer cannot hit the notes that they're trying to hit, or is getting exhausted while they're trying to sing, the hearer, as a result, questions the talent of the singer, or considers them less talented, rather than if they were to sing confidently in their range the whole time, in what they excel at. And you can see that today. If you went to a concert and the singer tried to sing notes that they could not sing, you would probably not be as impressed as if they stayed within their range and sang beautifully the entire time. This source shows that this is not a recent social phenomenon. The last historical source that I found was a German publication that translates to the physiology of playing bowed string instruments. This was published by F.A. Steinhausen in 1907. This was the only historical source that I could find that directly related to the way that playing an instrument affects the human body. Steinhausen was a doctor in Germany who was concerned specifically with the physiology of making music. Naturally, this source connects directly to my exploration. I had my considerations about the ways that music affects the human body, and part of this exploration was to find ways that I couldn't think of. One huge way that Steinhausen brought to light was the idea that musicians need to learn to operate their limbs independently of one another and yet coordinate them to work together to play in rhythm. And that is true. The natural inclination of the body is for limbs to reflect each other's movements. That's why a lot of times your two arms are essentially doing the same thing but mirrored. Your two legs are doing the same thing but mirrored. One thing that musicians have to do is to learn to operate these limbs independently. For example, as a piano player, I had to learn how to play notes on this hand and play notes on this hand independently of one another, but still coordinate them to make a pleasing sound and a good rhythm. Steinhausen called these co-movements. That is, if I move this arm wants to do this at the same time. If I'm playing the piano and I put this hand down, this hand naturally wants to go down too. One other thing that Steinhausen brought to light was the fact that musicians need to learn to efficiently control their muscles, to not exert unnecessary forces when they're playing the violin or the cello, and only exert the muscles that they need to. Musicians, when they're starting out, are not trained specifically to do the movements that they need to, and when they're learning, they exert unnecessary stress on muscles that don't need to be exerted. That's why when a person starts out music, it generally hurts more because they are not playing with the correct technique. Steinhausen explained that over time, musicians learned the techniques, learned how to efficiently use their muscles, only those that are necessary and no others. They learned that over time, to use only the muscles that are required in the specific ways that they are required and no other muscles. And this is why musicians can also play for longer as they get more and more advanced. Also, Steinhausen talked about how techniques in music first need to be examined closely and worked out when one is first learning how to play an instrument. For example, a violin player needs to specifically figure out the way their fingers need to move to play each note, the way that they should move between notes with their fingers. And they need to pay attention to how they're holding their bow, the way the bow connects with the strings, the way the fingers are hitting the strings and where they're hitting the strings. However, as musicians become more advanced, these movements become natural and autonomous and subconscious. And so a musician can focus more on the beauty of the sound they are playing rather than specifically the technique they are playing. The technique becomes natural and something they don't have to think about, which is why musicians that are more experienced can play more beautiful music because these techniques have become autonomous. Lastly, Steinhausen explained that there is a difference between exercising while playing music and exercising in the normal sense, like you'd think, like working out at a gym, or just generally trying to strengthen your muscles by working out. He explained that there's a difference between these. The specific muscle strengths that are developed through music are not achievable through general workouts. But in the same token, the physical strength achieved in working out cannot be achieved just by playing music alone. In order to strengthen the body in both ways, one must do both things. These historical sources show that music and the playing of it has affected the human body, and that there have been explorations of it. The skills that are demanded of musicians to be able to adequately exert their musical skill for others requires developments of the human body. As my sources on singing have suggested, singing naturally increases lung capacity, and this promotes better blood circulation and digestion. And as Steinhausen posted in his work about bowed string instruments, musicians need to develop specific techniques to be able to play their instruments well, and develop their bodies only through practice. Next, I explored some modern sources about this topic, rather than historical sources. One thing I expected for musicians to develop as a result of playing their instrument in their bodies is experiencing noise-induced hearing loss. And that is to say, being around loud noises so often would cause hearing loss. And according to Hearing Health magazine, musicians are 4 times as likely to lose their hearing because of noise, rather than non-musicians. I also explored the development of calluses. Calluses are tough developments of skin as a result of repeated friction on any part of the body. In guitarists, calluses develop on these fingertips as a result of pressing down on the strings. In bassists, calluses develop on these 2 fingers from plucking the strings like this. In violinists, calluses appear on the knuckles, called Gerrid's pads. In cellists, when they're playing some of their notes, they place their thumb on the neck of the strings and then place their other fingers, but anchor their weight on their thumb. As a result, they develop a callus on their thumb. In clarinetists and oboists, especially including myself, a callus develops right here because of the way a clarinet is held, all of the weight of it rests right on this thumb. Drummer's digit is a callus that develops right here on this pinky finger, and this is a result of the left hand traditionally holding a drumstick between these 2 fingers. And as a result, most of the weight of the drumstick rests right here on the ring finger and develops a callus here. And wind players, especially brass players, can actually develop calluses on their lips from repeated vibrations of their lips when playing their wind instrument. Additionally, I discovered a phenomenon called paronychia, which is when the nails cut into the skin around them here when pressure is applied, and they become infected. I discovered that this occurs in pianists and harpists because they are constantly putting pressure on their fingertips like this, which pushes their nails into their skin at these points. And this has actually happened to me, and I wasn't sure why this happened in the past, but it did occur. Now I understand why that occurred, because as a piano player, playing with my hand, and in fact, my nail must have cut into my skin here and then become infected. Considering the one historical example from Steinhausen about needing to be able to move your limbs independently and yet synchronize them, this occurs most in drummers. And that's because drummers, when playing at a drum set, have to control both hands and both feet all independently of one another. And this is something that I, as a piano player, can't do. Even though I can operate my hands independently and my fingers independently, once I include my feet, it's game over. So this is something that drummers need to develop. They need to develop the ability to move all 4 of their limbs completely independently of one another, and yet synchronize them and coordinate them in such a way that they can keep a steady beat. And a study on this shows that drummers are indeed much more able to coordinate their limbs in such a way rather than non-drummers. And the better the drummer was, the better they could hold a steady rhythm. This is most of the research that I accomplished through this project. But I wanted to look further than just historical sources and modern sources. I wanted to look further than just browsing the internet. I wanted to explore personal opinions of people, both myself and other people. So I interviewed six musicians that I personally know and asked them questions about how music affects their body, as well as how working in music has changed their perspective on it. As I've mentioned, in my personal experience, I've developed increased dexterity from playing the piano, as well as the ability to stretch my hands far apart to be able to hit large distances between notes with the same hand. When I played clarinet, I had a very thick callus on my thumb, as I've mentioned. When I played guitar, I had pretty thick calluses on my fingertips from playing guitar. Also from playing clarinet, my lung capacity is definitely expanded. I can hold my breath for a lot longer, as well as breathe a lot slower and a lot deeper because of playing the clarinet. I do believe that music has incited some level of hearing loss in my body. I seem to not hear as well as other people frequently. That is most likely attributed to the fact that I spend a lot of time around loud noises because of music. Also, from playing the piano, as well as the clarinet, I feel as if my posture has worsened. I feel as if I arch forward a lot more because as a pianist, you don't have a back on a chair. You have to sit on a stool. And naturally, the human body wants to curl over the piano like this. So I believe that my posture has grown worse because of playing the piano. I've also noticed that in my right foot specifically, I'm a lot more able to control my ankle than my left foot. And this is a result of playing the piano, because when playing the piano, you commonly use your right foot to apply pressure to a pedal, and you frequently take your foot on and off of this pedal by pivoting your ankle. This doesn't occur in the left foot, only the right foot. And this is probably why my right ankle can move so well and my left ankle not so much. Also generally, my dexterity in my fingers and my ability to move them independently has drastically improved. On both hands, I can move them with precision to hit all kinds of different notes and combinations of notes on the piano. And also as a result of music, I commonly find myself tapping my fingers like this on surfaces, or tapping my foot, or just having a need to move or create some sort of rhythm most of the time. I'll do things like just like tapping, or tapping my foot, or bouncing my leg. And some of these are definitely experiences that people have that aren't musicians. I do think that playing music has amplified that in me. But I didn't want to just explore my own opinions, because I wanted to get a more diverse view, while still being personal, about how playing music affects the human body. So as I've mentioned, I interviewed 6 musicians that I know personally, who have a broad range of experiences in music, that together provide a more complete perspective on how music affects the human body today. So without further ado, let's have my fellow musicians introduce themselves.
I'm Oliver White. I've been playing guitar and other instruments since about 2017, so that's 6 years. Right now I'm the lead guitarist at Christ Church Houston, and I've been doing that for about 2 years. I'm in a band with the bassist from church. We have our own band. That's been about since freshman year, so about 3.5 years.
I'm Donna Ewing, band director at Easton Middle School. I've been a music teacher since 1981. Started at the elementary level and moved up to high school, back to elementary, and now 18 years at Easton Middle as band director and general music teacher. I started in 4th grade on clarinet, and my dad said, "No, I'm not going to let you play because you're not going to stick with it." And here I am today, still playing clarinet. Just a lot of activities with school. We do a lot of parades, concerts, and small ensembles. So we're pretty active just here at school.
I am Lisa Rowe, and I'm music director here at Christ Church, and I'm also a music teacher at Chestertown Christian Academy. And I started music when I was in elementary school. In the 3rd grade, I learned how to play guitar. My music teacher, she started a guitar club after school, and so that's how I learned how to play. But I used it was a baritone ukulele, so it was 4 strings. It was the top 4 strings of the guitar. And that's how I learned, so I had to teach myself 6-string guitar. And I've been playing guitar ever since.
Cool. My name is Josh Euler. I'm a freshman in civil engineering. I've been really involved in playing musical instruments since I was about 5 years old. I started playing drums, the drum set at that time, and I have consistently ever since. And then I began to dabble in guitar around that same time. I've been very inconsistent with it up until the past 2 or 3 years when I've really taken a hold of it. I've played in bands throughout that entire time, ever since I was 5, and did a solo project for a number of years. And that was a great experience.
Well, my first exposure to music was when I was 5. I started taking piano lessons with my grandmother, and then it just kind of escalated from there. So I went from piano to then just more instrumental. I joined the concert band in elementary school, and then just kept that going into middle school, and that was when I really realized that I liked composition as much as I did, because I was just kind of the people around me. I realized I was more into it than they were. Currently, I work on campus at Duquesne University, where I am, and I do the sound recording equipment, and I help set up all the equipment. So it really gives me a different perspective in terms of concerts. I'm a composition major, which is a tie-in with music technology, which is more of the sound recording stuff, but the composition stuff I enjoy a lot.
I'm Sarah Chappell, and I have been singing ever since I was really little. I've been in musical theater since I was about 10 years old, and I've been singing with my church since I was about 12 years old, and I've been a worship leader at my church since I was about 16 years old, and I'm currently 18, turning 19 next year. I'm also a college student at the University of Maryland, and I am a part of the a cappella group Faux Pas.
One of the largest common threads between most of my interviews was that musicians mentioned their hearing and the effects that music has on it. As I said, personally, I have experienced some level of hearing loss, but let's hear what my fellow musicians have to say.
I know my ears have taken a toll with drumline. So my hearing is not where it should be just because of the loudness of the room that I'm in all the time.
Over the past year or two, I've noticed that oftentimes I may have to ask people to repeat things. Now, I don't know if people occasionally just mumble in my presence more so than others, but I have noticed that, well, in certain instances, I pick up perhaps quiet sounds very well. Other instances, I need some clarification.
When you're watching a concert with a concert band and they're playing something really loud to like the audience, I'm always thinking, because I'm sitting right there, and the trumpets are usually in the last row. So I'm like, oftentimes I'm sitting right in front of a crash cymbal, and it doesn't feel like that loud to me anymore. So I guess something's been changing.
Tinnitus, I would also not be surprised. I feel like more instances than I can count on my two hands of having, instantaneous, just for a few moments, some ringing.
I've been very adamant of protecting my ears as far as going to concerts goes. And playing at concerts, I always have earplugs, so I haven't deafened myself. But I've been better at picking out different sounds and different mixes and such.
So I used to not be able to pick up harmonies at all, and now I can almost pick up harmonies for anything I hear. I have a very good ear for it, and I'm almost positive that came from learning the harmonies that I had to when I was more of a background person at church. The leader would teach me the harmonies, and I would hear how it fit into a song, and so harmonies just started to make sense to me.
It's given me a better ability to hear and refine my pitch, what's in tune, what's not in tune. So I try to turn that off if I'm just out enjoying music, rather than like, oh boy, they were really sharp. Oh, they're really flat.
Since I've been taking the music theory classes at college, I've noticed myself noticing things a lot more in songs. Like, I'll pay more attention to the chord progressions rather than the lyrics. I wouldn't even call that a bad thing. I don't. It's distracting, but I like it because I feel like it lets me appreciate it more.
As you can see from these experiences, music affects the hearing of a musician both positively and negatively. Without proper protection, music can influence how well a person can hear, but also effects on hearing include those developed musically, the ability to discern pitch and tone and intonation, as well as being able to hear chord theory and harmonies. This can be helpful for a musician, but also if a musician wants to just listen to music, sometimes they can't do so without analyzing it musically. Another common thread was calluses, as I have mentioned in the past. Let's hear what my fellow musicians have to say about their calluses.
For me, it's mostly calluses. It's calluses on the guitar fingers, and these bass fingers.
I have this really weird thing on my finger from balancing my trumpet on it, and it's like a little nub.
Finger and palm calluses would be the most of it. Guitar, obviously, you'll get them on your fingertips a lot, especially if you don't play for a while, which happens to me. I happen to go a couple weeks without it, and you come back and the finger's like, what are you doing? And then calluses on the palms, where the fingers get joined with drumming for a while.
A lot of the musicians that I interviewed talked about their general dexterity and how music has affected how they move their hands and arms, how precise they need to be, and also how they've strengthened or hurt their hands, fingers, and arms over time.
We'll start with the guitar. In the context of the guitar, finger strength and dexterity, obviously, you have to be able to move your fingers up and down the fretboard to reach various, stretch in different ways, to reach the various strings. There's a good degree of hand-eye coordination from both guitar and drums, more so drums, you'd think. And you have to have coordination between the hands, obviously. I have to get those synchronized. And then finger strength when it comes to, say, bending and hammer-ons in order to get the notes where you want them to go. In terms of the drums, certainly wrist speed and dexterity and just endurance if you're playing.
A lot of these muscles in the back of my hands, these when I'm playing guitar, get stretched out a lot. And this guy right here gets stretched out. It gets pushed when I'm playing bar chords or playing a lot of passages that are hard, like, take a lot of pressure on it. My wrist will sometimes on this side when I'm picking fast, or my tricep sometimes if I have to do a lot of that. But the muscles themselves have to be like all the way down here. Sometimes gets like sore. A lot of tendons and stuff from pulling and twisting things. And when I practice piano, my hands get flexed a lot.
Because I play woodwinds, it's my fingers. And I definitely feel in the joints the aches and pains of, being from fourth grade to all these years, 38 years in music. It takes a toll.
As you can see, music requires some level of increased dexterity to be able to play well. This ties back to the historical source by Steinhausen that explored the dexterity needed to play the violin well. The musicians I interviewed also had some things to say about their posture and how their posture has changed because of music. Let's hear it.
I think that playing piano definitely has made my posture worse. Usually after playing piano for a while, my back hurts a lot. Same thing with trumpet, actually, depending on if I'm standing, because a lot of times in different situations I have to stand while playing trumpet. Usually in jazz bands, they don't give us chairs. They give everyone else chairs except for the trumpet players.
My posture's pretty bad, to be honest with you. Unless I'm standing and playing guitar, then it's okay. When I sit with guitar, it's like, so it's good at that.
As you can see, music appears to have pretty much only a negative effect on posture, but also strengthens the back. The next common thread between my interviews was the effects on lung capacity as well as the throat and airway from musical activities.
My lung capacity has gotten a lot bigger, though I hold my breath.
I'd like to think I've developed some increased lung capacity from singing in the car. Never big on that, but that and certainly vocal projection in a way, control of my inflection and such. You get occasional throat soreness, loss of voice from either long sustained periods in the car for a couple hours, or from frequent high notes. Don't do so well with those, but who does?
My breath control has improved. So I used to not be able to get through entire phrases of songs, but with more practice, it becomes a lot easier to do things like that. But also my throat gets sore a lot easier and I lose my voice a lot easier, but it's always for really short periods of time.
Lastly, a lot of my musicians had unique experiences to offer, ones that I didn't think of. So here are their perspectives on unique ways that music has affected their bodies.
While I'm playing, my trumpet really does affect my mouth a lot. It's like if I play for more than an hour and a half or 2 hours, then it stings.
Like a heavy instrument with a strap, it can get like a thin strap and a heavy instrument that pulls on the shoulders. So I get the really thick straps.
The biggest thing is my knee, just from the standing, physically standing, marching, being all around, trying to keep up with a marching band that's moving, just blow my whistle, catch up, and try and keep people on the right foot, on the right step. I also find that it's great exercise. It's, it's good for me because then after marching season or conducting concerts is over, then it's like, okay, I can relax.
Marching band, that was pretty physically demanding because I had to know all the choreography and go outside and do all the moving around while facing one direction. That was really interesting and challenging.
When I played in bands, I would have to lug a lot of equipment, heavy equipment. I actually sold an amp one time because it was just too heavy. It had 4 10-inch speakers in it, and it wasn't on wheels, so I sold it because I couldn't even pick it up.
I get into the music really easily, and so it makes my body really tense, and I do a lot of motions with my body, and so sometimes I do end up with sore arms because of gesturing too much or things like that.
When I'm conducting, you feel it in the shoulders a lot, and even just in the wrist, the arm, just with conducting with the baton versus conducting with my hands.
Right.
There's a great amount of debate in music circles around how perfect pitch is developed, how it's acquired. Is it entirely genetic? Is it learned from an early age? Can you learn it? I'd like to say I more or less learned it, not intentionally taught myself, but just sort of developed through listening to music probably from around the age of 10. there's a common analogy with perfect pitch where you see a color and you know that that board is the color blue. It's maybe not quite as instant for me with certain notes, but that's generally a good way to describe it. I've also, through music, developed what I'd like to think is a decent ability with relative pitch, which is hearing how notes relate to one another in scales and such. And so that's been very helpful.
Because I played guitar for such a long, started as at a young age, I would play along with my record albums. In doing that, because when an album is recorded, it's on a click track. So there's a constant metronome with the music. So now I have an internal metronome in my head.
Some of these experiences were ones that I never would have thought of, especially Sarah's soreness from gesturing while she's singing, or Lisa's internal metronome in her mind. I also never considered Josh's development of perfect pitch and relative pitch. These physical effects show the variety of ways that music affects the human body and the physical demands that music requires of a musician. A lot of these effects appear to be negative. For example, the effects on posture, the throat soreness, the back soreness, the joint pain. These are likely not what a musician signs up for when they're starting to learn music. These are side effects caused by music that are demanded of musicians, whether they like it or not. But a lot of these effects are positive, such as increased dexterity, increased lung capacity, and more precise hearing. So music has a network of positive and negative effects on the body. Here's a specific example from Lisa about how music has a positive effect on her body.
I have chronic Lyme disease, so I'm in a lot of pain. But when I'm playing music, I don't feel that pain. My hands can play the guitar, and the pain just goes away because I'm just into the song and the music.
As you can see in Lisa, music actually provides a way out from the pains of Lyme disease. This is not uncommon. You often hear musicians talk about how music is a way to relieve their pain, relieve their stress, both mental and physical. And personally, I can attest to that music is relaxing for my body, and after playing music, usually I feel pretty good. The other side of this perspective that I haven't touched a lot on until right now is the effects of working in music on a musician's perspective of music. I wanted to see how, when music is applied as a source for money, which is a primary thing needed for survival, if that changes how one enjoys music. Because most musicians start out recreationally. You don't hear a lot of stories about musicians who started playing music because it was a moneymaker or because they wanted to have a music career. Rather, they began recreationally and then naturally developed the desire for making it their career. In my personal experience with working with the church, it is positive and negative. Sometimes the things that are demanded of me are not things that I signed up for and can be very stressful. But at the same time, I do enjoy playing, and I enjoy that I make money off of it. Being involved in music for so long, I naturally considered the idea of majoring in music and making it my career. But ultimately, I did not want to, because I didn't see myself making music the primary center of my life. And I felt like making music more than just recreational, as I've mentioned, would make it not fun. It would make it stale and unenjoyable. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So instead I majored in computer science, and music is more of a hobby. So I also wanted to explore if others shared the same experience or different experiences. And all of the musicians that I interviewed have in some way made money off of their music. They all have unique perspectives to apply to this. So let's hear the general consensus from my musicians.
I guess it goes back to the same thing, do what you love and never work a day in your life. I really truly enjoy coming to the church or to the band and playing music, and the money is the payment is just kind of an additional yay, I get paid for this, but it's like I'm not working when I'm playing. I'm having fun jamming with you or everyone in the band, it's just, we all just enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun to just go enjoy it. And making money off of it is just an awesome side effect.
Getting money is never a bad thing. It certainly doesn't make it less enjoyable, but if I never made a cent off of music, I would love it just the same. I didn't go into it thinking, I need this to make money. This is all I care about. No, the main point of it was still the art and the playing music, because that's just one of the things I enjoy the most in life. It's just insanely satisfying, and it's an amazing experience to work and collaborate with people on that sort of crafting art, and then being able to perform that for audiences. That's a great motivator.
I love having a music career. I love having to do what I love as a job. So I love teaching and I love being a music director. Playing for enjoyment, I do not enjoy anymore.
I do enjoy studying music. I like how I get to bring it. I like to keep it with me instead of just like having it on the side. And like that's what it felt like in high school. I like the opportunities that are presented with me studying music because it gives me like more of a reason and more time carved out to develop those skills. Like if I wanted to pick up something else, I'd be like, that's related to what I'm doing.
A lot of the musicians that I interviewed absolutely love what they're doing. And they don't do it for the money. They do it because they enjoy it, and money is just a side effect. This was a very pleasing thing to encounter, and I'm glad those with a passion in music have not poisoned that with the need for money. Here's another common thread about the intersection of labor and music.
There are times where being a leader of a band is really stressful because a lot of people don't learn the things beforehand, or they don't understand music theory the way that they probably should, and you have to explain it to them in a certain way. So it can get really stressful and upsetting in those situations. I think that with anything in life, like anything career-wise, anything that you have to work towards, the effort of moving towards it is going to be stressful in some way. And that's how I feel about lead up to services, leads up to performances. But then once I'm in the service or I'm in the performance, it's like all of the worries go away. And I understand why I have gone through all of that because I love it so much. So I do enjoy it. It always ends up being very rewarding.
Sometimes I just want to crawl under a rock. You know, it's really hard to struggle to get musicians and singers together. It's like a juggling act, trying to get everybody together. And once we're in the service and it all comes together, it's fulfilling.
It's sort of a really satisfying thing to be proud of, that this piece of art that you, and then in my case, other people that we wrote collaboratively, that we made happen just from our own thoughts and abilities and practice and teamwork, that other people found it to have enough value that they would show that, not just by coming out to listen, but by supporting, the dream, I guess.
The bottom line of this is that the musicians that I interviewed find music to be stressful when leading up to it and practicing and preparing for a performance or a session. But once they're actually in the heat of the session, they're reminded of why they work in music, why they go through all of that stress, because it is ultimately fulfilling. And I can personally agree with that. We have 3-hour rehearsals before the church services when I play at church on the weekends. And sometimes those can be stressful. But playing for the services and seeing all of the people enjoying the music that we've worked so hard to create is very fulfilling. As you can see, music has a network of acute effects on the physical body that don't occur with most other fields of study. And ultimately, these effects are both positive and negative. Also, through my interviews, I realized that for most musicians, making music their job is not a bad thing. They enjoy it a lot, and it can be stressful at times, but that's with any job. So I'm glad to hear that music careers are generally fulfilling pursuits. The topic of the effects of music on the body are very complex, and there are so many different instruments and so many different applications of music that it's hard to narrow it down to just a few talking points. The general agreed opinion: music may take some negative tolls on your body, but it is not enough to justify quitting music or not enjoying music anymore, specifically just because of the physical effects. In conclusion, I hope that this has brought to light some of the ways that being a musician affects the human body, whether that's good and bad, and also how working in music affects how someone views music. This was a very enjoyable topic to explore that is very near and dear to my heart, and I hope watching this video was informative and meaningful.
I think Calvin should get an A on this project.